Alright, let's do this one more time. A couple of weeks ago, I made a video where I ranked every classic Sonic stage from the Genesis era, that is, 1 through Mania. In that video, I said I would make a part 2 to the series where I would go over the modern classic Sonic stages, that is, from Sonic Generations all the way to Superstars. Well, this is that part 2, if that wasn't already obvious enough. So yeah, due to the small selection of stages from those games, this video won't be nearly as long as the first one in this series. Like seriously, 1 hour and 17 minutes, are you kidding me? Now these classic Sonic stages are a bit interesting, as they started to appear at a time where Sega kinda lost the sauce at what makes a good classic Sonic level. Not to denigrate the top 10 on this list at all, but it just seems as though Sega didn't really have the same philosophy at making these levels as they did with the last ones. And judging from the voting results of my recent polling on this, I got a feeling that you all know how this is gonna go. Sonic Forces will be at the very bottom, with Superstar stages being in the mid-tier, with ultimately Sonic Generations being at the highest. So, without further ado, let's just get into it. Okay, right off the bat, I'm just gonna say all the entries for F tier are gonna be completely full of Sonic Forces levels. Are you kidding me? This game is trash. But as predictable as it is, one of the main reasons why Sonic Forces classic Sonic levels are so atrocious is because of the physics and music. Dear God, I don't know what Sega thought they were doing with this, but please fix this game. Okay, here I was going to look back on some classic Sonic footage from Sonic Forces, because heaven knows I'm not going back to play that game myself. I noticed for an experienced Sonic player, they were struggling to jump from this platform in the Green Hill Zone. Why is that, you might ask? Could it be that the game artificially boosts its acceleration whenever you're in midair, kinda like how the Avatar does in this stage? Only it's worse with classic Sonic, because they do this for any part of the stage that they feel you need to go faster on, so that means for loops, for slopes, and for jumps for some reason, they felt the need to increase his acceleration by an unknown amount, making his platforming feel completely inconsistent. And because of that, you get moments like these, where the player is struggling to platform on these Little Planet-esque structures. This stage is pretty notorious for the infamous auto-scrolling segment at the end. Seriously, do I need to remind you why this is bad? But for many reasons, this just doesn't feel like a final stage in my opinion. But above all other things, this stage is just really boring. The background is static and uninteresting, with the only animated piece being these red lights that are shining on God knows what. This completely uninteresting terrain, with there being barely any slopes and these annoying missile placements. And the aforementioned planetoid platforms that work fine in any other classic Sonic game, but under Sonic Forces' exquisite physics, don't really do much for the player, I gotta say. Also, is it just me, or does the classic Sonic stages in Sonic Forces just feel so slow? Like, in Sonic Mania, for almost every stage, if you're good enough, you can easily force the camera to do this iconic gimmick where it struggles to keep up with Sonic and his speed, adding lots of spectacle to the gameplay. But with Sonic Forces, you get none of that. It just feels like the game caps you off for some reason. Which is weird because even when you're on speed pads, it just judders and jinks around the place like it doesn't know where it's supposed to go. Sonic Generations, by comparison, has smooth camera movement that really sells the speed of Sonic. Whenever he zooms past the camera at blistering speed, it feels intentional and less janky. Hell, even Superstars got this right. Could this be a result of Sonic Forces being made in the Sonic Lost World engine? Who's to say? But overall, Iron Fortress is just indicative of all the problems that Sonic Forces classic Sonic levels have. Bad music, uninteresting platforming, unpolished platforming, and an absolutely brilliant auto-scrolling section at the end. Because everyone knows that auto-scroll levels in platforming games are always fun, and they never get on anybody's nerve. Overall, this is F ranking. I'm tired of talking about the stage, let's move on. Oh, I'm sorry. Did that music transition scare you? Well, now you can officially say you've gotten the authentic experience that the game designers around Sonic Forces wanted you to have. Nah, but in all seriousness, this is easily the worst song of the game, and the only reason Green Hill Zone is above Iron Fortress is because I kinda like the aesthetic of this level a bit. Now do not get me wrong, Green Hill Zone being reused for like the 50th time? Inexcusable, I know. But if you're gonna bring it back, at least bring something interesting to the table like the cool sand gimmick, or at least the sand background that implies there is something going on here. Seriously, this one piece of concept art from Sonic Forces has more personality than the entire game. It's like Sega had a fun quota that each employee had to follow, and once they were done, they were like, okay, you're no longer allowed to work in the game. This Green Hill is really nothing to write home about, Besides the terrible music, of course. The platforming is bland, the enemies in this game are simply atrocious, and am I the only one who wish they used more sand gimmicks? I mean, if that's the only thing you're going to change about this level, then use it to your advantage. The most notable part I remember is this stupid invincibility section at the end, where the robots just stand in a straight line and watch as Sonic plows through them. Pause. It's like the developers were too lazy to come up with an actual satisfying ending, so they're just like, hey, let's just give them invincibility and watch them plow through all these enemies. That'll be fun, right guys? Easy F tier, this stage is atrocious, get it off my screen. Wow, just like Sonic Mania and Sonic Generations, the next one on this list is Chemical Plant. Another boring stage with not much to say on, although I think this stage exemplifies the horrible physics implementation that Sonic Forces is known for. I mean, you all know this infamous slope. I mean, you can see the momentum after the loop is completely artificial. Absolutely no mathematics going on right here. This stage does set itself apart from the other Forces stages with the fact that you actually have to do some tight platforming, and the background is really nice and well animated, one of the best in the game. But I cannot get over the fact that they reuse Chemical Plant again for the third time, and the fact that they don't really utilize any new gimmicks. It's all the same stuff. I mean, even modern Sonic's version of the stage utilizes a cool gimmick, with these spinning platforms being moved from the pressure of the chemicals, leading to some cool platforming moments. By the way, this is the type of gimmick I could see easily being put in Sonic Mania. But for a game like Sonic Forces, add in any more creativity and you might threaten an economic recession for the team. F tier as always, the enemies are bland and uninteresting, the water sections are annoying as always. And can we please import the Sonic Generations classic Sonic physics? Jeez. Alright, honestly these next two can go any place on this list. But for number 23 we have Death Egg Zone for Sonic 3. Oh wait a minute, no that would have been made higher on this list, never mind. Okay, let me ask you a question. You see this cool gimmick from Sonic 3? Really unique, really engaging, has some nice fluidity to it, some nice sound effects, and a really great spectacle at the time, given the fact that this game is limited to a 16-bit art style. Now let's look at the same gimmick, but in Sonic Forces version of the level. Oh boy, I almost lost my lunch with that one. You see how much more lifeless this game is compared to the classic games? It's pretty sad, not gonna lie. Once again, the background art and visuals are somewhat better than the original, given the fact that this is a 20-plus-year-old game, but jeez man, Death Egg Zone from Sonic 3 just had this aura to it with this cranky music, this hard industrial aesthetic, and an overall vibe and difficulty that Sonic wasn't supposed to be in this place. While this version of Death Egg just looks like a regular factory that we've been to before. Which is actually pretty funny, because I feel like modern Sonic's version of the stage is actually one of the best in the game. You start off with this cool section where you run in the interior of the base only to get jetted outside to the skirmishes of outer space. It's really cool spectacle. Even if the thrill of gameplay doesn't necessarily match the exciting visuals. While this classic Sonic stage has neither. There's no going outside the base. You have this really boring MIDI track that plagues the entire soundtrack of Sonic Forces. And you once again have this final invincibility bit of the stage that adds nothing to the level design. Yay! Don't we love automation? I tell you, when you feel like you're putting more effort into the stage than the level designers, I think that's when you know you kind of messed up. And as I said at the beginning of this segment, I could put Casino Forest and Death Egg basically in the same spot on this list. I do not care that much about these two stages. I guess I put this one slightly higher because I do like me some casino stages, but this is a bad example of one, so really, should I even have it this high? Who am I kidding? Put Chemical Plant above this one. At least that stage had gorgeous visuals to go with it. This one just looks boring with these tree textures. And this copy and pasted Sonic Lost World Night Sky. Now, I know it's a pretty controversial opinion to think that the casino stages in Sonic games are pretty fun, but I defend my opinion with the idea that the original one from Casino Night Zone in Sonic 2 played with Sonic's physics in a way that made it fun and less annoying and gimmicky to get through. The casino-like gimmicks were a natural progression of Sonic's physics and not just the designer shoehorning in a casino segment just because of nostalgia. On top of that, the rewards were actually meaningful because dying in those games actually meant you had to restart the entire thing instead of just having to suffer through this terrible game. Hell, rings in general mean very little in Sonic Forces since they give you abundance of them and you don't have any lives in the game, so what's the point? It's not like you're gonna die on any of the bosses unless you have the mental fortitude of a 5-year-old. That is, the mental fortitude to just not get bored of the game, not actually beat the stage. But look, I'm running out of jokes here. There's so many ways I could say this stage is bad because of X without it getting tiring, so we have to move on eventually. I'm going to skip straight to the C tier because I feel like it would be redundant to make a D tier on this list, just because there are not that many stages in the modern classic Sonic era to pick through. Plus, it's a lot more mean if I had the Sonic Forces classic Sonic levels a whole 2 tiers below the next tier. I mean, that's gotta mean something to y'all, right? Okay, so I did a little bit of a lie. When I said that there was only going to be Sonic Forces stages in F tier, it was a little bit of a josh because I actually like Ghost Town from Sonic Forces a lot more than the other stages. Being the beginning stage of the game, it's kind of easy to excuse this stage's lack of gimmicks and let's just say momentum-based shortcomings that will make themselves pretty obvious later in the game once the player gets more acclimated to the controls. But as a starter level, outside of this atrocious cutscene that I've mentioned many times, it's actually pretty good in spectacle. I like the visual spectacle of the Death Egg robots wreaking absolute havoc on the city in the background. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but the graphics in Sonic Forces are definitely not one of its shortcomings. Even though it's less stylish and arguably less polished than other Sonic 3D games, its graphical fidelity makes up for it in a lot of ways. Plus, unlike the other classic Sonic stages in this game, this song actually sounds like it came from the Genesis era, and not just like someone having a seizure in the Yamaha Arius Pro. So good on that one, Sega. On top of that, the terrain is actually pretty nice to traverse through, with these corkscrew-like segments and this really nice platforming section, even if the physics are still a bit wonky. The enemies are as useless as always, but overall I'd say, this stage serves as a great welcoming to what's going to be probably the most mediocre platformer you've ever played in the modern era. And for that reason, I've granted Ghost Town for Sonic Forces patches into the C tier. Now let's move on to A tier. I'm kidding. For our next stage on this list, we finally made it to a Sonic Superstars level, and the one that I think is the worst stage in the game, and that is Golden Capital. Now hear me out. I know it's so cool to see this beta stage that was cancelled from the original Sonic 1 finally implemented into a mainline game. I know it's so cool, but at some point you have to realize that they removed the stage for a reason, and that reason makes itself pretty evident from the moment you start actually playing the level. First off, what the hell is the premise for this level? It feels like Marble Garden Zone all over again. We're in this golden casino-like place with billboards and pinballs, but also there's lava flooding the entire place. Not to mention these underground digging sections where Sonic has to burst through this terrain, which somehow doesn't trigger the lava to rise. I mean, the architects must have been drunk when they built this place, because absolutely nothing here makes sense. This is called the Golden Capital for Pete's sake. You'd think a place meant for rich people I presume would be better. What do they think this is, Dubai? Second of all, the gimmicks for this stage match its confusing aesthetics. We have a drilling mechanic, the anti-gravity mechanic, these annoying pinball sections even though we literally had a stage dedicated to that earlier. In Act 2, we bring Sky Chase Zone back for some reason, because heaven knows we need more of that in our lives, am I right? Also, this stage is home to possibly the worst boss in the entire game, but we won't get into that. Also, another thing about this stage that makes me rank it so low is just the sound design. Sega, what on earth were you doing with this level? Every sound effect is like 10 times louder than the music, and it's ear-graining. Put aside the fact that these sound like your generic MIDI asset pack sounds, but they just sound so repetitive and obnoxious half the time. Like, not everything has to get a unique sound effect, or a sound effect at all for that matter. And it doesn't help much that this game doesn't have the best environmental sounding. I should have phrased that better. And the weirdest part is that no other stage in this game has this problem, except for one we'll talk about in the future. But even then, it's just one gimmick and not the entire freaking level. Golden Capital from Sonic Superstars just goes to show that a great idea isn't enough to sell yourself. You need to also have great execution. And this stage does not have the best execution, even though it's leagues better than anything Sonic Forces can offer. And that's why I hereby designate it as the worst stage in Superstars, although I know most people will disagree with that. Moving on, we have Sky Temple from Sonic Superstars. And this level is pretty interesting because, unlike Golden Capital, this level isn't so much bad as it is just boring to play through. Okay, so right off the bat, I used this stage's visuals as an example in my Superstars video to poke fun at how dead and static some of these levels look at times. I mean, are you kidding me? The reason why I feel like this is such a detriment in Sky Temple is because of the fact that this is mainly an air and wind based level, which means that there's going to be nothing but sky happening for most of the level. Does this mean we get greeted to lots of gorgeous sky imagery, maybe some cool moving clouds, maybe some ferocious thundering skyline, or a nice gorgeous sunset to ease the player in since this is the third level of the game? Nope. We just get bog standard gray aurora, which could have been done in a Photoshop filter, I'm pretty sure. And the visuals on the grounded sections don't look that much better either. I mean, I'm pretty sure this sky backdrop is ripped straight from Sonic Adventure, guys. But how's the gameplay, you might ask? Well, I'm happy to say that it's not the most intrusive stuff ever, but it's also not that innovative. You have your standard moving platforms that the wind carries that Sonic's forced the platform from. Crisis City did it better, cough cough. But you also have some pretty new gimmicks introduced to the Sonic franchise, like this moving block thingy that only moves when Sonic is standing on it actively. There's this pretty interesting pole line gimmick, which reminds me way too much of ping pong, but overall, I just don't find Sky Temple that interesting. Also, was I the only one getting lost in this level for the first half? I'm pretty sure there's a section where you have to platform upward, and I fell off without knowing it, forcing me to continue in the wrong path. And I'm sad to say that that was the most memorable and interesting part I had in this level. It's just one of the ones you have to get through, and one you don't think much about after it's done. And for that reason, it's easily the second worst stage in Sonic Superstars in my opinion. We now get on to the B tiers. This is where stuff starts to get really good. For 17 on this list, we have Frozen Base Zone from Sonic Superstars. And boy, I just gotta say, this is possibly the second worst boss in the game. You already know what the first one is if you played this game at any capacity. But I don't know, for an ice level, I just felt that this stage was pretty charming, all things considered. It has one of the most gorgeous backgrounds for as weird as it sounds. I love the sprawling winterscape with the Egg Fortress slowly rising in the background. Really reminds me of Press Garden Zone for some reason. And the theme, while still failing to mimic that Genesis sound chip, is not that hard on the ears. I especially like Act 2, which I was not expecting, with the cool little egg robo section where Sonic has to go up into space while shooting the enemies. Something like this would be dreadful in any other classic Sonic game, I feel like, but here it just feels kind of relaxing in a way. But back onto Act 1, sure the colors may be dull and all, but the gimmicks are nice, to the point, and really easy to understand. The only annoying part is this falling terrain section, which is not telegraphed directly to the player. Seriously, why would you have a slope here that goes off a cliff? That doesn't make any sense. Hey! And the conveyor belts can get a bit annoying sometimes, but it's not that big of a deal. Just overall, Frozen Base was a nice, refreshing penultimate level that I was not expecting on my first run through of Sonic Superstars. And for that, it gets to be at the bottom of B tier. How nice. Now for the next one up on this list, we have Sand Sanctuary Zone, and this one is kind of a hard one. For any of you all who watched my previous video on this series, you'd know that Mirage Saloon is my favorite desert level out of any game ever. So to see another desert level in a Sonic game that goes more in the direction of Sandopolis rather than Mirage Saloon, it's gonna lose a couple of points for that. But man, if this is not one of the best songs in the game, I mean, just listen to this theme. For this reason alone, I had to bump Sand Sanctuary up quite a bit, but even without the good music, I mean, you have this cool backdrop of the desert landscape, these cool sand slides and platforming sections, and the overall enemy placement is pretty nice and fair. Though I would say this level adds to the new Super Mario Bros. Problem I was talking about before in my videos. Sand Sanctuary does just enough to stand out a little bit from the rest. Also, I feel like people are over-exaggerating just how frustrating this boss is. Like, I had to take a break and talk about something that makes Superstars so good, and that is the power-ups. Superstars probably has the best integration of power-ups out of any classic Sonic game. And yes, I do mean better than the Elemental Shield as well. I know, hot take. But here's the thing. Each one of these power-ups are meant to be used throughout the levels. If you actually bother to go and use them for the bosses, they don't actually take as long as you think. They're still overly repetitive with a lot of waiting, which is inexcusable, but I don't know. I've started to lighten up to them a bit the more I play through this game. Plus, an annoying thing I didn't like about the elemental shields is that the level designers would intentionally place them where they'd be the most obvious to use. This means that whenever you come across it in the level design, you know that, oh boy, it's gonna be a water section, or oh boy, it's gonna be a section with a lot of heat or rings. Meanwhile, with Sonic Superstars power-ups, you can use them whenever you want. This adds a lot more variety in gameplay in my opinion to the player's agency, because they can choose whether or not a power-up is suitable for each situation, making the gameplay more dynamic. I don't know, it's just that seamless integration, plus with the fact that you get them with every Chaos Emerald, it just makes it so much more of a fun gimmick to use. But that's enough of my 2 cents, you can tell me what you think in the comments below. But for the next one on this list, we actually have our first Sonic Generation stage, and the worst, Chemical Plant Zone for Classic Sonic. Now, if you know me by now, you should know that I absolutely glaze the classic Sonic stages in Sonic Generations. I think they utilize excellent camera movement alongside brilliant level design to sell the depth and nuance of each stage. And because of that, they offer something far more unique than even the Genesis stages could offer in my opinion. The only stage that doesn't do that is Chemical Plant. For once, I can say that Sonic Force's background actually looks more engaging than this version of Chemical Plant. For half the time in the zone, you're just staring at drab metallic backdrops and these weird moving conveyor belts. Compared to how dynamic and fluid all of the angles of the other classic Sonic stages are in Generations, this one just feels lackluster and uninspired. And to top all of that off, it basically copies and pastes the Chemical Plant Zone from Sonic 2 right into the game. I mean, we were already talking about lazy level design for all the other times they bring back Green Hill, but for the first time they bring back Chemical Plant, they just reused the exact same stage design? I mean, come on Generations, what were you thinking? Sure, it's really polished, it doesn't have the most annoying enemy placements, but it is certainly the most forgettable stage in the game. I usually just spam the spin dash and move on, as there's very little to take from the stage. It's just pretty boring. And the worst thing a Sonic game could ever do to a player instead of frustrating them is boring them to death. Ugh. But I assure you, there won't be another Sonic Generation stage on this list for a very long time. As for the next stage, we have Lagoon City from Sonic Superstars. This was another stage I featured in my Why Are the Graphics So Terrible section of this video. Man, I keep mentioning that video. It's almost like I want y'all to watch it or something. Anyway, it feels like I'm overhyping Lagoon City so much, but that is just for the sole determining factor that it has the best level theme in the entire game, and it's not even close. Lagoon City Act 2 is the only theme in the game that actually feels like a Sonic Mania tier song. And I've mentioned it before, the instrumentation, the reverb on it, it just sounds so majestical. Definitely not deserving of the drab visuals that this place has to offer. And while Lagoon City isn't necessarily a bad level per se, I do have a few gripes with it that hold it back from being a top tier stage. For instance, this is a water stage, and while that negative connotation doesn't directly apply to Superstars' level, it still does aid in some of the crappy level design that I mentioned earlier in my videos. Annoying water physics, questionable enemy placement, and the dreaded drowning mechanic, all things which I relate to the unfun factor that Sonic water levels tend to have. Although in Lagoon City's case, it does bypass some of these things with fast speed sections on these water slides and a cool underwater gimmick that was ripped straight out of Hydrosity. This level just feels like a perfect middling of the road for a modern classic Sonic level. It has its ups and downs, strengths and weaknesses. Feels like the perfect type of ebb and flow. While I certainly couldn't find myself putting this stage any higher in this list, I could definitely see an argument for why people might say this is one of the best in the game. It's just to me personally, Lagoon City has a lot of stuff that holds it back, which is unfortunate because it has such a banger theme inside of it. Also, we're not going to talk about Amy's act of the level. And finally, closing out the B tier, we have a stage that I'm certain you're surprised made it this far up on the list, and that is Press Factory, a stage that I found quite enjoyable despite the negative attention I've heard online. So first off, let's get to the elephant in the room, the annoying gimmicks for both Act 1 and 2. Act 1 features this central hydraulic press that after each 10-second interval, presses down on the level, forcing everything to jump unless you're already in the air. This one isn't actually that bad. I feel like once you get used to it, it's easy to understand how its mechanics works and work around it to progress the level. But Act 2's gimmick is just, shall we say, a bit more intrusive. So you have this giant egg robot thing, threatening to end it all if you let his timer run to 0. Do not let his timer run to 0, or it'll insta-kill you. That's the gimmick. It's like the Sandopolis gimmick and Oil Ocean Act 2 gimmick, but somehow even shittier. And the funniest thing is, I actually remember this gimmick from a Sonic fan game, Sonic After the Sequel, and Technology Tree Act 3, where there's this giant UFO robot that chases you around, and if you let its timer run to 0, or rather, if you let its homing missile hit you, you just take a little bit of damage. Making it so that the robot insta-kills you, that's not really fun, I gotta say. Other than those two minor things, and the music, seriously, it's gone downhill by the time you get to this point, I find Press Factory Zone pretty enjoyable. The environment, for once, is actually pretty original and not something we've seen before in a Sonic game, and I particularly like Act 2's more surrealist vibe, like you're infiltrating a base, kind of like Secret Base Zone from Sonic Advance 1. The spotlight shimmying in the background really add a nice touch. I like this really cool gimmick in Act 1 with this circle thing that you have to strike 3 times to break, the great planetoid orb things that they bring back from Titanic Monarch, and the bonus stages from Sonic 3 if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, this stage gets way too much hate in my opinion, and it's definitely an underrated level for the super inspired concept of this level alone. The idea of running around in a giant hydraulic press factory is just so cool, easily at the top of B tier. Starting off the A tier, we have possibly the most unique classic Sonic level I've ever seen in a game, and that is Cyber Station. For the aesthetics of the stage alone, I give this such a high ranking just for how creative and imaginative it is. I absolutely love these pixelated aesthetics, where Sonic goes into like a digital realm and has this pixels movie art aesthetic. Most of the gimmicks are pretty good as well, such as this swimming fish that you have to swim through these entire sections full of enemies, and this really cool Pac-Man traversal gimmick. But where I'm going to absolutely knock some points off is for this stupid mouse gimmick. Why, Sega? Why did you have to ruin such an amazing stage with this one gimmick alone? It's infuriating. First of all, if you get hit at any time while on this trail, you instantly fall off and have to restart the entire thing over again. Not only that, but it also doesn't indicate where you're going in the up direction, but you basically just have to guess as to which route is the safest. And I've died in this place many times. One, because these enemies that hit you, they can't actually be stopped. Not only that, but you have to commit to whichever path you choose, and you can't go backwards. Why can't you go backwards in this thing? That makes zero sense. The fact that this knocks you all the way down to the bottom, mixed with the shoddy sound design, makes this probably the worst gimmick in the entire game in my opinion. Yes, I hate it even more than Press Factory Act 2's gimmick. So because of that, I've had to put it at the bottom of A tier sadly. But other than that, everything else in the stage is absolutely stellar. I love the synthetic sounding music that's more akin to the Sonic Advance games. I like the cool Blue Matrix-like background, and the boss for this level is actually pretty fun, I have to say. Well, fun if you have the burst power-up. If you don't, then good luck beating it. For the next stage up on this list, we have Speed Jungle, probably the most advertised stage for this entire game. And by God, that was a good decision because this is an absolutely solid level. First off, the stage theme is super energetic and fast-paced, giving credence to the idea that this is a pretty speedy jungle, who would have thought? But it does more than just that, of course. The grinding sections of the stage feel so natural and integrated, yet stand out so much for a classic Sonic level. I love the vine mechanic as it swings you upward, leading to a lot of vertical platforming, which is pretty rare for a classic Sonic game. And these cool switches and buttons that extend grapple hooks to different parts of the level. It really makes this place feel like a maze, and you can't just hold right to win. And then we get to Act 2. Oh boy, the stupid darkness mechanic. Look, it's not as bad as everyone says, but I do have my gripes with it, as it is kind of annoying. For instance, it can make dodging these rocket enemies on the grind rails a little more frustrating since you can't really see ahead of yourself. These swing bars are also a pretty weird mechanic because unlike most Sonic games, they work so differently from other games where you actually just angle and press the button to swing off of them rather than timing your jump. It's pretty bizarre. But other than those couple gripes, Speed Highway is an excellent beginner stage that introduces the players to the classic Sonic mythos perfectly. I can totally see why they advertised this level and its main theme as sort of the lead main stage for Sonic Superstars, and it's totally deserving of that. Right up next to that, we have the level that came before it, Bridge Island Zone. And what's there much to say about this level? It's just another great introductory stage for the player. First off, can we just talk about that stage music? Such a warm, welcoming, and nostalgic feeling it gives off to the player. It's like the stage itself is saying, come here, we know you miss classic Sonic, and unlike Sonic Forces, we're gonna actually put some effort into making our stages fun. And by the way, it's actually the only stage theme, besides the other one on this list, that naturally progresses to the Act 2 version of it beautifully. And speaking of beautiful, gosh, just look at that gorgeous background. For Act 1 and Act 2 of this level, the backgrounds just mesmerize me. I really love this sunset aesthetic, as I stated earlier. You see, Sega? When you make a first level that isn't just Green Hill Zone, you could actually do some wonderful things. The gimmicks for Bridge Island Zone also just have a lot of spectacle, such as these turnpipes that send you back and forth between the foreground and background. The most iconic gimmick from the stage being the giant fish that tries to eat you at the end of Act 1. Geez, Sega, you just can't have a water level without a giant fish trying to eat Sonic, I see. No wonder the poor fella is afraid of water. Also, yeah, can we just talk about how this is technically like a beach zone, but it has 0 underwater segments? So that's pretty cool. But overall, this stage is just a fun, frenetic, and super fast-paced beginner level that gets players ripe and ready for the grand adventure they're about to go on. Excellent stage. And with that, we jump from the first level in the game directly all the way to the last level in the game, Egg Fortress. Okay, so just right off the bat, I did not expect this level to be such an amazing surprise when I played it, but dear god, the whole themes and aesthetics of this level just scream epicness. Like all great Final Sonic levels, this one takes place in space. So because of that, the gimmicks are all pretty sci-fi themed and pretty unique for a classic Sonic game. One major point of praise that I can give Sonic Superstars is that even though it treads old ground with its stage themes, they really come up with unique and fun gimmicks that stand it apart from the rest. Like this gimmick in Egg Fortress, for example. You're stuck in a room with anti-gravity and have to carefully navigate these security lasers to make sure they don't hit you. And I'm sorry, but this just feels like it was ripped straight out of a Bond movie. Are you kidding me? Sonic feels like a complete badass being able to jump off of the walls and stuff. On top of that, you have the absolutely banger music going in the background, reminiscent of Just Beats and Shapes for some reason. And you have other awesome sections of the stage, like these open sections of the base with the falling terrain that you have to jump off of, and you're greeted to a gorgeous shot of the vacuum of space as the facility literally crumbles around you. This spectacle was so satisfying, it made me reminisce about Sonic Generations classic Sonic stages for a second. But I know what you're all waiting for. The most unique gimmick in this stage by far is in Act 2, where Eggman uses some sort of machine to completely reverse the time of the stage, forcing you to traverse back through it, but in reverse. This gimmick, the idea of this is just so out there, so crazy for a classic Sonic game, and yet it works so well. Now all of the obstacles that the player had to go through have a completely different context to them, as the player now has to approach them from a different perspective. The fact that this is the only classic Sonic stage that you have to go left to win is just so creative, man. And I like how this surprise doesn't come as repetitive or annoying either, just because of how well made the level design is. It's sad that such an amazing level is home to by far the worst boss in the entire game, but man, Egg Fortress has got to be one of my favorite Final Sonic levels, just for its innovativeness alone. Easy A tier. Oh, look at that! We're finally back in another Sonic Generations level. And for me, it's not a bad level at all, but Sky Sanctuary stands just a tier below the peak of the Generations classic Sonic levels in my opinion. But do not let that detract from the fact that this stage is absolutely mesmerizing. First off, can I just talk about the background? The idea of the Death Egg slowly rising through the clouds as Sonic traverses through this giant ancient ministry, just nice spectacle. I love the 3D-ness of this stage, with all the egg robos and these spinning platforms giving nice depth and feel to the player. This running platform gimmick that the player has to use to traverse through the sky, pretty nice as well. But my main reason for why I don't like this level is that it's just so easy to blast through, man. I know people before me have talked about this, but the spin dash is way too overpowered in Sonic Generations. And because of that, you get moments like this, where you can just zoom past half of the level design without even thinking. And I think Sky Sanctuary suffers the most from this problem, because most of the carefully laid out platforming can just be skipped if you place a well-timed jump. Is that good game design? Should the player be rewarded for timing their jumps correctly? I don't know, but it feels kinda lame to just blast through this stage at blistering speed sometimes, and not take in all of the beauty. But as I said in my Classic Zones ranking video, Sky Sanctuary was such an amazing concept that they just had to bring it into Sonic Generations. And that ending segment, where you're running up the spinning tower to make it to the Death Egg in time, is indicative of why this stage is so iconic in the first place. Through its amazing music and aesthetics alone, it rises to the height of what a good classic Sonic level should look and feel like, in the modern era as well. And finally, to cap off the A tier, we have the amazing level, Pinball Carnival. One of the funkiest classic Sonic levels I've ever had the pleasure of playing through. The Sonic 3 Knuckles? This is how you do a carnival level. Fast, frenetic, and full of energy. I put Pinball Carnival's theme just right below Lagoon City Act 2 as being one of the best tracks of the game. I mean, the song alone you just can't help but bob your head to, and the level itself doesn't hold back with its energeticness either. Every single inch of this terrain is full of fun gimmicks that push the player's intelligence to its limits. You have these roller coaster platforms that you have to time your jumps from in order to collect rings, get these medallions, and even dodge enemies. You have this amazing turn switch gimmick that changes the direction of the blue or red flames respectively. And even the pinball aspects of this level, like this wheel spinner to make Sonic jump higher, utilizes his momentum perfectly. And I haven't even mentioned Act 2, where the backdrop brilliantly transitions to this more ghoulish carnival aesthetic with bright sights everywhere and a nice Halloween-esque vibe to back up the new aesthetics. Everything gets turned up to 11. The gimmicks from Act 1 get more dangerous and surrealist as you have to time your jumps better. The enemy placement becomes more unforgiving and erratic. It's just, this place feels like a dangerous carnival. You see Sonic Forces? This is how you make a good classic Sonic stage, utilizing Sonic's fun momentum gimmicks and unique playstyle to deliver an engaging experience that leaves you constantly on your toes and feeling like a badass. An excellent stage to end off the A tier with. I'm surprised most people don't talk about how great the stage is. It caught me completely by surprise in my first playthrough, and in my opinion, it's easily the best stage in Sonic Superstars. Alrighty then, we're finally to the last tier of this video, the acclaimed S tier. These are the stages, of course, that I believe to be the best modern classic Sonic stages of all time. And as such, they're made up mostly of Sonic Generations stages, as I believe those classic Sonic stages to be just brilliantly crafted through and through. These are the ones that I just can't get enough of. I come back to replay these levels on a daily basis, and it's obsessive. For the first level in this tier, we have Speed Highway. One of the most surprising levels that I saw adapted in Sonic Generations as a kid. I mean, I was expecting Windy Valley, maybe some Twinkle Park, but no, Speed Highway turned out to be the most popular stage in Sonic Adventure 1. And really, this should have been kind of obvious to me. I mean, you have a stage which entire focus is going really fast in a Sonic game. How is that not going to be the most popular one? But man, the way Sega converts the thrill of running along skyscrapers and jumping from helicopter to helicopter in the 2D space is simply incredible. I like how dynamic the camera angles in this stage are, with Sonic jumping from building to building being captured at this high-octane angle. All the moving helicopter segments being shot from this wide-angle camera lens, giving credence to the idea that even though this is a 2D space, we're still going to use that 3D environment to its advantage. I love this section with the cars coming from the background to hit you as an obstacle. Everything in the stage just screams dynamic and alive. And that music too? A really nice synthesized remix of the original theme. Not only sounds adorable, but it sounds like a nightclub raid that you attend to late at night. Easily deserving of the S ranking, and I feel like Speed Highway is just signifying of what's to come. All the Generations classic stages reimagine his gameplay in unique and innovative ways, and I'm here for it. For the runner-up to that stage in this list, we have an oldie but a goodie. Yes, I know it's cliche at this point, but Green Hill Zone from Sonic Generations is simply incredible. Now I know most people complain about the revamping of Sonic Generations for classic Sonic stages, I know. But keep in mind, when this game came out, it was not as overused as it was today. This stage is full of passion and creativity, unlike the reused garbage we get nowadays, which is mainly used for lazy asset flips. Can I just take a moment to gush about how amazing the level design is in this first level? I mean, we have the brilliant introduction of this chopper enemy. In the first game, they would just sprout out of the water, and if you didn't see them coming, you had to potentially get hit by them by complete chance. But in this stage, they're in the background first to show off that they exist, just right before they come into the foreground and become an actual threat to Sonic. What? That's just genius! This not only serves to warn the player that there is danger should they stick around too often, but it's also a very fair obstacle to newcomers to the series, giving them lots of leeway as to how the difficulty in Sonic will derive from. It's truly incredible stuff. Once again, the camera movement is dynamic as always, with the game brilliantly showcasing a new mechanic where it will slowly drift backwards and zoom out in order to indicate to the player that they should proceed with caution. This whole cavern area, where you have to slowly platform with enemies being introduced, is just good game design. It also makes it so that if you're good enough at the game, or if you played this level before, you can skip this segment entirely with well-placed jumps. I haven't even mentioned just how gorgeous and surreal the art style is for this stage. I swear, man, Sonic Generations had the best art direction out of any Sonic game, bar none. The pseudo-realistic graphics it gives to its cartoony world are just so appealing to the eyes. And this Green Hill's checker pattern aesthetic with the tiki statues in the background just goes to show how much thought and passion the art directors did into bringing this world to life. One of my favorite iterations of Green Hill Zone, I could play this one all day. For number 5 on this list, we have Crisis City, one of the darkest Sonic stages, but also one of the coolest. I've already been foreshadowing how high this pick is on the list with my non-stop praise of it earlier throughout the video, but man, let me glaze it some more. First off, the stage progression. I love how you start at the bottom of the cityscape and slowly make your way up to the skyscrapers being torn apart by the fire tornado. Such good spectacle, such great progression. The musical theme accommodates this flow with its chaotic and frenetic tone. The guitarist in the song serving as longing cries in the stage, almost as if the level itself is screaming for you to help it. Then you get to the ending section of this level, with all the torn platforms moving in the wind. This goalpost fakeout is probably the most iconic part from this level, adding so much dread and tension to how hard this level is. And the platforming segments here are actually fairly difficult if you're not careful in watching your step. I just love how nicely the camera movement is during all of these stages, how it smoothly follows classic Sonic from building to building while it's collapsing during the spectacle of it all. I also like the enemy design of this level, adding them in nice places to make platforming more easier should you be skilled enough. It's just all around a banger stage and easily a S tier in my opinion. And the craziest part is that the rest of the top 5 are somehow even better than this stage. Absolutely incredible. Up next is possibly the most controversial pick on this list for many people, but I feel like Planet Wisp is an amazing final level to send off the audience for Sonic Generations. Let me just mention this first. That background, y'all. Look how vibrant and colorful it is, with the purple poison brilliantly contrasting the gorgeous waterfall. If you look closely as you progress through the level, the backdrop slowly progresses to more mechanical and robotic imagery, filling the idea that Eggman has slowly taken over this planet. The level design for Planet Wisp is difficult, but not unfair. I know many people complain about the Spike Wisp, but I feel like its integration into this level is more natural than anything Sega has done with the Wisp ever since then. And since there's only one you have to deal with, you can focus solely on trying to use it to its best advantage. Use it for level skips and time saves, or use it brilliantly to solve the various puzzles in the level. It's truly up to the player. I love how platform heavy the stage is. It really puts to the test how well the player has been paying attention to their movement. This is one of the few stages in the game where you can't spam spin dash to win. You have to actually engage with the game's mechanics. And it's better for it. The musical theme, while not the best remix of Planet Wisp, gives a much more dire and synthetic vibe to the stage, making it more intensive. And that's just the main thing about this stage that impresses me. They took a relatively normal stage from Sonic Colors and boosted it up to final level status, and it somehow feels natural and in place for Sonic Generations. Yes, I know Asteroid Coaster would have made a far better final level, but there's something so serene and graceful about this calm little planet that Eggman has taken over, being the final level of the game. Almost as if Planet Wisp serves as the thesis as to why Eggman is such a despicable villain. The stage brilliantly ends with this beautiful wide shot of Eggman's energy turbine trained down to the planet, beautifully mixing technology and nature, and showing how they work in tandem with each other. Just an absolutely phenomenal experience, and way too overhated of a level. We're now into the top 3 of this list, and the part where I say, these are some of my favorite platforming levels of all time. And of course, I had to put my favorite level in the game, at least for modern Sonic, Seaside Hill, as number 3 on the spot. Now I'll talk about in a later video why I think Seaside Hill is the best stage in Sonic Generations, but the classic version of the stage is also insanely good, with the gorgeous visuals and tight platforming and all. I just want to say, even though Seaside Hill is essentially the Green Hill of Sonic Heroes, Sonic Generation does its due diligence to make it stand out from it. For one, this is a really water-heavy stage, and the game designers made the brilliant decision to combine Ocean Palace with Seaside Hill, making it stand out all the more. I love all the crazy camera angles the stage gives Classic Sonic whenever he jumps into one of these cannons. It really sells the adventure and liveliness of the stage a lot, and this wide angle section of the stage where you're jumping from island to island, simply mesmerizing to see. I love just how calming and relaxed this stage is, even though it is a water level. The level theme has a low oscillation, which really makes it feel like you're on a nice calm beach, giving a nice relaxing vibe. And that ending segment, when the giant wheel chases you throughout the level, adding a lot of tension and spectacle to a would-be chill level, just is a brilliant way to cap off such an amazing recreation. I know it may seem shallow that I put it this high for what is essentially just really good visuals and music, but man, like I said in my other video, that can take a level really far, and sometimes it just comes down to the little things that makes a level so incredible. Easy S tier, and I got a feeling y'all can guess what the next 2 levels on this list are going to be. Just let that musical theme come in. City Escape's classic remix is possibly one of the greatest Sonic songs ever made. They somehow took a masterpiece of a song in Sonic Adventure 2 and made it even better with its synthetic voice lines and amazing techno remix. Like, how do you do that, Sega? And don't even get me started on the level design. I gushed about this level to high heaven in my Sonic Superstars video, but man, the level design in this is just simply incredible. First of all, the gun truck being an active enemy throughout the level and not just one last-minute obstacle is simply brilliant and a nice way to jazz up the level. The way the camera is able to mess with the framing of the truck, showing it as a giant, large, insurmountable object before towards the end where he just crashes on this tiny little pole that he can't go in between, is simply a nice bit of visual storytelling. I love the cute little skateboard that Classic Sonic gets in this level, mimicking his modern self. Absolutely tearing down the pavement as this giant rocket truck tries to kill you is simply an experience you have to have for yourself. And then this iconic building segment where the truck slowly tears down all the platforms and you have to jump before in order to escape. This is the type of set pieces I imagined when I first played Sonic as a little kid. Just the amount of imaginativeness on display shows just how much Sonic Generations level designers cared about bringing every level to life. Some of these levels are arguably better than the games they originated from. What? And I feel like the last level on this list is most indicative of this. It is symbolic of just the amount of care and attention to detail Sonic Generations level designers had for this amazing IP. And in my opinion, they were probably the best level designers that ever worked at Sega. Because for number 1 on this list, we have the amazing Rooftop Run from Sonic Generations. I mean, is there even much to say about this level? Great music, amazing spectacle, nice platforming, and a great variety of gameplay. First off, you start off this stage with this amazing set piece at the beginning, with the background showing off this beautiful fiesta, as Classic Sonic has to platform on these pavilions and jump from rooftop to rooftop. Every single tile in the stage layout is decorated beautifully with nice party attire, and all of the gimmicks are somewhat party themed with these balloons that bounce you higher up into the air, and these giant barrels on the interior of the stage that are filled with what only I can say are non-kid friendly beverages. But speaking of this interior section, damn, look how dynamic and lively it is with all the attention to detail and the robots that actually try to hurt the player. You see what I mean when I say Sonic Superstars and Forces just don't have the sauce that Generations did? Finally, any level that has this amount of depth and personality to it. But of course, that all comes to a head for the final section of this level, where we have the brilliant clock tower climb. This portion of the level is just simply incredible. Probably the most memorable set piece in the entire game for the classic Sonic levels. I mean, you have the player traverse up this giant clock tower full of enemies and traps for him to get hurt on, only for them to finally succeed and spin dash their way to crashing into this blimp, where he then destroys the blimp itself, leaving it crashing into the background. Like again, what is this Mission Impossible BS? And none of this feels gimmicky at all. It all is a natural extension of the classic Sonic philosophy, just applied to a modern type of gameplay style. And that's ultimately what the classic designers at Sonic Generations did best. They adapted these brilliantly nostalgic stage into the modern era by adding these wonderful set pieces and memorable gimmicks. And Rooftop Run is just the level that stands above the rest as the true innovator of this philosophy. It features great music with a beautifully and dynamically made background with memorable set piece after memorable set piece. And for that, it easily makes it as the top ranking as my favorite modern classic Sonic level. Thank you everyone if y'all watched it this far in the video, and please feel free to tell me what your favorite modern classic level is, as I'd love to hear your opinions. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz if you enjoyed the video, blah blah blah. And join me next time when I go over the DIMS classic Sonic levels, that is the Advanced series and the Rush series. I may split those into 2 videos as well, as that's a lot of stages I have to go through, so bear with me please. But with all that, I hope you enjoyed the video. Peace.